uh, and we strongly support agrivoltaics, which really bring an opportunity to do solar development and also work and in working with working lands in agriculture. A lot of the agrivoltaics uh, facilities that we've toured, we've seen lots of different utilizations, and so our guests are going to really bring that forward and share the information. And it is a real economic opportunity for rural communities. Next slide. So I will turn it back over to Carrington at this point and look forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Dr. Smith. We are really excited about agrivoltaics, specifically here in the Southeast. We believe there is a lot of potential for growth and for really innovative policies to be put in place to support agrivoltaics. I will say at the moment, there is currently no state policy or regulatory mandate that incentivizes agrivoltaics in our region. I think most of us here know that the Southeast does have really high solar energy potential, but transformative solar policies in general do not exist in every state in our region. As we point out in our Solar in the Southeast report every single year, there are states who are leading in solar development, and then there are others who are lagging behind. Those who are leading have had really progressive solar policies on the books for years now, and we believe work like that needs to be done in order to make agrivoltaics more accessible and in order to grow it in this region. Government support is key to scaling agrivoltaics. Next slide. So despite the fact that we don't have, really innovative incentives here in the Southeast for agrivoltaics, we do have a combination of technical guidance, frameworks, and voluntary initiatives, primarily related to pollinator habitats. North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia all have a wide range of resources that are available for developers and other farmers and landowners who are interested in co-locating solar and pollinator habitats. Florida has their own unique system and they have their own scorecard, which we have seen as a really incredible policy used in the Midwest in order to spur agrivoltaics development. So all of these resources that are listed on the slide in front of you were created with the help of state agencies, lawmakers, universities, and environmental nonprofits. These southeastern states have demonstrated the level of collaboration needed in order to create a framework that supports agrivoltaics, and we're excited to see more of that hopefully in the future. Next slide. So in other parts of the country, there are actual incentives, financial incentives for agrivoltaics projects. Many states are using the following policy levers that you see on your screen to support farmers and increase clean energy generation in their states. We'll hear more about Massachusetts' direct compensation program later on from Turner Jackson, who's going to present on the Massachusetts SMART program for us. There are other states who offer property tax exemptions when agrivoltaics projects are located in rural areas and on agricultural land. And there are quite a few states that are also funding research for demonstration projects in order to see what agrivoltaics could look like at scale and to understand what crops and what sort of vegetables and fruits work best under panels, which is really exciting work. I'll add that there are other policies that we've seen, including some states are including a state definition of agrivoltaics into their laws. Virginia just passed one last year. And other states are creating legislative task forces to study agrivoltaics, or they are directing their state agencies to look into agrivoltaics in order to see what financial benefit that could create for their state and for their rural areas. And we hope to see more of that in the Southeast. Next slide. So I will add, in order for agrivoltaics to really grow and in order for it to become more accessible, we need to see progress at the state level, but also at the federal level. I will note that just in the past couple of years, we've seen a lot of obstacles to solar development at the federal level. Many of you are aware, I'm sure, that the investment tax credit for solar projects is set to expire and is actually in the process of being phased out. That was a 30% commercial investment tax credit that many landowners and farmers were able to take advantage of in order to have easier access to developing agrivoltaic systems. There are also quite a few federal agencies that have slowed or completely halted solar development through permitting and regulatory frameworks in the last year. The last one I want to talk about here, and that Jim Johnson will share more about, is the Rural Energy for America program, which gave financial support to farmers and rural businesses who were looking to add renewable energy and energy efficiency to their homes and to their businesses. The REAP program has faced escalating restrictions in the past couple of years, and so I'm looking forward to hearing more from Jim Johnson about the status of that program and what is happening now. What we are really excited to see is that all forms of agrivoltaics are growing in the US. Crop production, pollinator habitats, and grazing, which is rather popular here in the Southeast. This is in large part due to innovative solar developers who have partnered with agricultural experts, universities who are conducting research and demonstration projects in partnership with our national labs, and state policymakers who recognize that agrivoltaics is key to the energy transition and can be an incredible economic opportunity in some of our rural communities. Ultimately, government support is key to advancing agrivoltaics, and policymakers have a really important role to play. Next slide, please. So I am pleased to introduce our very first speaker, Jim Johnson, who is the Director of Rural Development and Agribusiness and a Senior Business Consultant with the South Carolina Small Business Development Centers at the University of South Carolina. Jim, I'll turn it over to you.
Sure. Thanks for the introduction. And I guess I'll further introduce myself. Again, I am with the University of South Carolina with a program called Small Business Development Centers, SBDCs, which is a SBA resource partner. So we are SBA resources for small businesses all across the United States. SBDCs, you can find it in any state in the US plus territories. We are a great resource. Our services are free, confidential, and in most states there are agribusiness programs. I run the agribusiness program in South Carolina. I've been with SBDC for about 11 years and have been running that program for some time, and also work in rural areas of South Carolina. And as you can imagine, I've done a lot of work with USDA rural development over the years, and have probably worked with over 30 or so REAP projects and getting those funded throughout the years. So as a business consultant specializing in agri-food, agribusiness in rural areas, um, highly invested in these different models, including agrivoltaics. But you can move to the next slide. I spent a lot of my time really in financing projects and understanding financial mechanisms for helping farmers, landowners, rural businesses, basically run a business and hopefully be successful, right? And so I did want to give some, I guess, context or framework to working with the USDA REAP grant, which I know a lot of folks are interested in. So I'm going to give an update on that. But really, I'd like to, kind of start with thinking about the capital stack on how you get an agrivoltaics project funded. Because as you know, this is a pretty capital intensive approach to business. It's a combination of agriculture and energy generation or energy offset. So, farming in and of itself is a capital intensive project. And then you add in, bringing solar panels and that energy component to it, it can get up there. So just considering, how you might go about, funding this, and does it really make sense? Is it feasible? SBDCs, that's pretty much what we do for folks. One of the things is just help, determine feasibility and also help access the capital to make this a reality. So some of these programs were mentioned, you know, really you're going to need some private capital of your own or from partners, typically to get into this business. And everything is unique. It just depends on where you are, size of your business, what your resources are. Taking all those variables, you may have to put more cash in for one type of project than another. It just depends on the scope of the project as well, right? And then of course there's the debt funding side, where you can go out and borrow money for an agrivoltaic project. In my experience, I would call this like a specialty purpose loan. A lot of banks are not as familiar with this particular type of activity as they are other businesses. So some banks might pass on this. There may be very specialized banks that just do solar loans. A lot of times the vendors, would connect you directly with, those solar loan payments. But from some years ago, probably about 2, 3 years ago, I saw more and more banks like diving in and opening special like solar departments within the bank. I think that's kind of flattened out a little bit, and they've kind of, come back on that. So finding debt funding, it depends on the project and the applicant as well. But there are guaranteed loans through the SBA and through USDA to fund this. Basically, a guaranteed loan is when a guarantor such as the USDA or SBA works with a lender and they guarantee a portion of the loan, therefore mitigating the risk to the lender. And both the SDA and USDA fund these, and they have a special loan guarantee through the USDA rural development through the REAP program, which is still active. You can get a REAP loan guarantee. And sometimes you get some better terms, through these guarantees. If you have like an issue, one aspect of an issue, going through a guaranteed program might help, access that capital, whereas normally you couldn't. And then there's just, regular agricultural loans through your different cooperatives and ag lenders, ag credit. They may or may not fund solar, probably likely not, because it's not a typical agricultural concern. But, if part of that funding comes with the development of the agricultural operation, they can be a part of the capital stack, and maybe part of the loan comes from an agricultural lender and then a part comes from a conventional lender or a vendor. And of course, there's specialized energy revolving loan funds out there. South Carolina, which I'm from, South Carolina, actually does have a revolving loan fund for energy, renewable energy projects. And the issue with that loan fund is that it typically runs out very quickly. So when it's refreshed, the money is just pretty much allocated almost immediately. So it needs more funds. So it is funded partly by the state, so that's a policy matter too to get more of those funds put in there. But South Carolina, like many of the southern states, trail in policy, as we'll see and was demonstrated earlier. So we're still catching up on that side. So a lot of opportunity for us to enact, some things that can really help. So some of the federal and state tax credits were mentioned already. The 30% federal tax credit for solar, which is pretty good, which is being phased out. So we'll kind of see where that goes. South Carolina, and every state probably has their own, tax credit. And South Carolina is 25%, but the kicker is it's only for 35,000. It's limited to 35,000 cap. And then that is realized over a 10-year span, so that you can take $3,500 a year. And these tax credits are depending on your tax liability, but I've had many clients who sold these, tax credits on a secondary market. So that's still out there. They pay, so many cents on the dollar for your tax credit, and you can get cash for it, which might work out for you. So there's that options. another way you can use tax credits. The USDA REAP program, which I'm listed as speaking about, um, is still out there, and pretty much in South Carolina, I got one of the last REAP grants funded in 2025, which really wasn't realized till 26. But that's, as many of you probably know, the REAP program has been put on hold for um, an administrative review. They want to make some changes to the program, and they aren't accepting any applications at this time. The REAP program has been around since about 2003, so it's kind of a long-standing, program. Initially, it funded about 25% of a renewable energy project, the eligible cost of that project. And then more recently, in recent years, it went up to 50%, which is pretty amazing. And they had, good bit of funds, in those programs, and was able to help a lot of folks. The cap of that is a $1 million grant. So it's only going to fund so much of a project. Really, it's aimed at, small business and farms who are both rural small businesses and agriculture producers are eligible entities. And I think, the gist of it is, for farmers, it's going to offset the cost of high energy usage farm, but it also was made available to, I guess, help with energy production, which a lot of businesses took advantage of. My last check-in with the USDA, I did call them last week for my contacts to kind of say, hey, where's USDA on the REAP program? And of course, most of the folks are, stand by, wait and see. They're renewing, some of the regulations. Some of what I've heard around regulation changes, they don't want to displace productive agricultural lands, so they want to prohibit any use of solar on those productive agricultural lands. They also want to, I guess, steer it towards, small farm development and offsetting, for small farms, and really keep it around that. But we're waiting to see. I know that they had discussion of the REAP in the Farm Bill 2.0. Not sure, when, that'll be passed or what it'll look like in the end, but they had REAP there. So they're still interested in it. So that should be interesting. But if you can move to the next slide, I think is in terms of financing in the agrivoltaic project, it's going to take a blended approach of streams to fund it. Also, another question that I got on this is, what revenue streams can you produce to support a project like this? Because in the end, a funder or banker or anyone investing money into a capital project is interested in the revenue streams that it creates. And from a banker standpoint or a lender standpoint, they're all cash flow. They all base loans on cash flow, right? So they want to say, hey, what are these streams of revenue that are going to support any debt service? And also, how are you going to be sustainable, with this project? So as folks, many of you know on here, one of the main benefits of agrivoltaics is you bring in that, diversification of income, which if you're a high energy user like a dairy or, a poultry operation or, something uses a lot of pumps, then of course the energy offset could be amazing, right? And really you're offsetting for energy you pay for today and in the future, which, no, inflation's not gonna escape us. So there's that, but then there's also the possibility of selling energy, back to a utility or to the grid. And, that's going to be different, all over the country. Some folks will buy it, some won't, some have various policies on the power purchase agreements, cooperatives versus like a bigger electric utility. You just have to look at each unique situation and figure out, the value there that's created, and if it makes sense, for that side of it. Of course, you have farm income on an agrivoltaics model, and typically with farm income, you really need to consider your farm markets, your skills and your resources for creating a farm product, and then how that plays into your agrivoltaic operation. A lot of times farm products have to do with the story that come along with it, especially if you're direct to consumer farming operation. But yeah, there's so many different types of farm operations that probably could be incorporated and work side by side with energy system. A lot of ways you can go, but with any business, it's going to depend on the market and your capacity, to serve that market. Conservation income, I throw this in there. Pollinators are mentioned, but the NRCS has programs out there such as EQIP and CSP that can help fund conservation methods, and just another way to one, improve the land and promote conservation in the land and the air and the water, and another is to generate a little bit of revenue for the farm. Um, there, you may have remembered Climate Smart, which has basically been, relabeled advancing markets for producers, AMP. There's a lot of different AMP programs out there. You should look into them. In South Carolina, we have like two or three that affect our farmers here. Some are really good. Most of them, all of them are better than NRCS payments, but definitely looking into that. These are more temporary, but another way to try to create a revenue stream through conservation activities, which really complement, kind of the philosophy of solar, and then it's the conservation effort. And then, the diversification of income is just going to help any farm. All farms are looking for that diversification, and solar offers that diversification, which really protects you, from when things go wrong. So there is an ROI, on agrivoltaics. You're going to have to determine that because every farm is unique, but it's something that you should look at, and SBDCs, help with that. And of course, there's a strong social and environmental return without a doubt. Something to consider, in addition to the financial return, and take that into account. But you can go to the next slide. And yeah, this is just and we'll send these slides out, I'm sure, but just a place to start in thinking about agrivoltaics is just feasibility. Like with any business, does it make sense? Is it going to make money? Is it going to be sustainable? Is it right for me? Do I have the right setup and those type things? And then thinking early on about that financial stack that I mentioned in the beginning, and how the investment will structure, and does it make sense in the long run? And then a lot of good approaches that I've seen in the past is just phasing in some of these projects, starting small, growing it, seeing how it works out, and going from there. But it's definitely something where it needs some detailed research, and looking into a lot of different ways to go there. And happy to answer questions and help in any way. SBDCs, and connect you to your local SBDC. I'm the chair of our rural ag group for the SBDCs across the country, which really connects you into folks that have a ag background. And I think I have one more slide, but it's just a thank you, and let me know if you need my help. Feel free to contact me anytime. There to assist.
Thank you, Jim. Just a quick reminder to everyone that if you have any questions for our speakers, please drop them into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. We'll answer as many as we can at the end of the presentations. Okay, now I am pleased to introduce our second presenter, Turner Jackson, who's the Renewable Energy Program Coordinator at the Massachusetts Department of Energy Resources, to share more about their agrivoltaics incentives and overall their solar programs. Turner, over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Carrington. And thank you, SACE, for giving me the opportunity to discuss DOER's work on agrivoltaics. I really hope that our efforts and lessons learned here in Massachusetts can help to further support agrivoltaics development across the country and in the Southeast. So at DOER, I support the implementation of the Commonwealth's Solar Massachusetts Renewable Target Program, or we call it the SMART program for short, which is the state's primary solar incentive program. providing direct compensation to projects ranging from small residential systems all the way up to multi-megawatt commercial facilities. In this presentation, I'll provide a brief high-level overview of the structure of the SMART program and then discuss the way in which agrivoltaics projects can take advantage of our incentive program. I'll also discuss the key requirements for agrivoltaics participation and the role that our counterparts at the Massachusetts Department of Agricultural Resources play in implementing this. I'll then highlight some successful case studies of farms that have taken advantage of our incentives before ending on a discussion on the important role that community engagement has played throughout this entire process. And we can go on to the next slide. So starting off with SMART, as I just mentioned, it's our primary solar incentive program. In SMART, our three utility companies compensate solar system owners for each kilowatt hour of electricity generated by their system over a 20-year tariff term. So different solar project types will receive different incentive amounts based off of several factors. First, projects receive a base compensation rate, which is determined by the project size. And then projects can then receive additional incentives through what we call adders, which, as the name implies, are added to the base compensation rate. So these adders include building-mounted systems, brownfield projects, landfills, canopies, community solar projects, and then obviously most relevant for this presentation, agrivoltaic systems. So to help visualize what this looks like, in the upper right-hand corner of this slide, we can see an example. So let's say there is a 300 kilowatt agrivoltaic system that wanted to participate in our program. The first step would be determining their base rate. And in this program year 2026, projects between 250 and 500 kilowatts receive a base compensation rate of around 24 cents per kilowatt hour of electricity produced. And then if the project does qualify to be an ASTGU, which is what we call agrivoltaic systems participating in our program, they can add an additional 9 cents to that base compensation rate, leading to a total incentive rate of around 33 cents per kilowatt hour. And finally, over this quick overview of the program, we've had over 50,000 systems qualify, and that's led to around 1,300 megawatts of deployment in the state. So now we can quickly jump to what the agrivoltaics component looks like in SMART on the next slide. So first, there are three provisions in our regulations that govern the overall SMART incentive program that are most relevant to agrivoltaics projects. First, the regulations state that the system will not interfere with the continued use of the land beneath the canopy for agricultural purposes. Second, the project should be designed to optimize the balance between generation of electricity and the agricultural productive capacity of the soils beneath. And third, the project should have a raised structure allowing for the continuous growth of crops underneath the solar modules with height enough for labor and/or machinery as it relates to tilling, cultivating, soil amendments, harvesting, and grazing animals. So those are kind of like the very basic stipulations that lead to everything else that we've done to create our agrivoltaics programming. So to be eligible to receive this agrivoltaics adder and to qualify as an ASTGU, applicants have to go through a relatively rigorous predetermination process. So in addition to submitting a normal SMART application, which any project needs to do, the applicant needs to provide details about their site, including the acreage, agricultural tax status, and property maps. Second, they need to secure a letter from the University of Massachusetts Clean Energy Extension, which I'll touch a bit more on the role that this group CEE plays in a few slides. But at this stage, they're this great center that supports farmers in building out their SMART applications to ensure compliance with the program. Projects also need to provide details of their solar array and also need to conduct a shading analysis to ensure that the proper conditions are being met for the crops growing underneath the panels. And this is a modeling service that was created between DOER and an external party that is free to use for any applicant. And then finally, they need to provide a detailed agricultural plan, that covers things such as, whether the site will be used for growing crops or providing grazing, any relevant soil tests, the equipment being used on site, so on and so forth. And we can move on to the next slide. Great. So none of this work could be done without the collaboration of our sister agency, the Massachusetts Department of Agricultural Resources. Obviously, at DOER, we're energy experts, not agricultural experts. So we really have found it crucially important to involve MDAR at all stages of the process of designing and now implementing this part of the program. So first, they were crucial in the development of our guidelines, as well as the predetermination application that I just discussed. And they also conduct tandem reviews of individual projects with us. They'll attend and do site visits as needed. And, of course, they're much more in tune to the agricultural community in Massachusetts than we are. So they're a key point person or point agency in terms of making sure that we at DOER are able to be connected to the right people. And then finally, we want to make sure that DOER and MDAR are coordinated on all of our policy objectives, both energy and agricultural, as well as our long-term climate goals. So now we can move on to the next slide. And now I'll discuss 3 case studies of agrivoltaics projects that are participating in the SMART program in Massachusetts. You'll see that these projects support different types of agricultural activities, including vegetable production, cranberry production, hay, and sheep and cow grazing. So the first one up is Sajowski Farm, which is located in Hadley, a small town in western Massachusetts. This is a slightly smaller project at 375 kilowatts. And what's unique about this project is that it not only receives our agrivoltaics adder, but it also receives our low-income community shared solar adder. And I'll discuss a little bit more about that in a second. So Joe, the owner of this farm, it's been in his family for several generations. He's been a great champion for agrivoltaics in the state, both, not only in terms of promoting it within his community, but also in terms of advocating for policy and program development at the state level. And his farm produces a lot of great local produce to be supplied to schools and the neighboring University of Massachusetts Amherst. And, I was just talking about this low-income community shared solar adder that he also has. And we kind of view this project as a multi-use project, not just a dual-use agrivoltaic system, because the electricity being produced on his farm actually supplies bill credits to low-income residents across the state to help reduce their monthly utility bills. So this is a great system that's, not only producing local food for the community, not only generating additional revenue for the farm, but it's also helping to lower utility bills across the state. We can now go to the second example. So the second example is Knowlton Farms. This is a larger 2-megawatt solar project that's paired with BESS and also is a community shared solar project. And like Joe's farm, this has been directly owned by the farmer's family. And this farm produces fruit, vegetables, and hay. And what we really like about this project is that it actually helped to save the farm from going out of business. This farm had been in the same family for generations, but they were at risk of selling it off before determining that the financial incentives of a dual-use agrivoltaic system could actually help to keep it within the family. And not only did the solar facility help to save the farm from being sold off, but the solar installer actually paid for additional infrastructural improvements on the farm, such as a wildlife fence around the perimeter, as well as the installation of a new well. So I think this is a good example of showing that more benefits can come from pursuing these activities than just the financial benefits. And finally, we'll go to the last example. So Massachusetts is really proud to be one of the country's largest cranberry producers. And like most other cranberry bogs in the state, this facility, Ring Road Bog, is located on the Commonwealth South Shore, around an hour south of Boston. It's similar in size to the previous project that we just discussed and is also paired with energy storage. And, what's unique about cranberry farming is that cranberry fields are flooded in the fall during harvesting season. And so to account for this flooding, Ring Road Bog and other cranberry agrivoltaics facilities in the States need to accommodate this water by having the racks being built higher off the ground and with some additional protection around the base of the racks to account for any potential water damage. So those are 3 great examples that we're really proud of here in the state, and now we can move on. Great. So on this slide, I'll go over some of the primary concerns that we see from Massachusetts stakeholders and residents regarding agrivoltaic systems and kind of some of the approaches that DOER and these projects have undertaken to hopefully mitigate some of these concerns. And then on the next slide, I'll then go over more community engagement and buy-in strategies. So the first type of community concern that we see a lot relates to a worry about the loss or degradation of productive farmland as a result of the installation of an agrivoltaics project. And while that's a valid concern, what we find here in Massachusetts is that farms are really susceptible to abandonment or conversion due to a whole host of economic factors here in the state, and that these dual use systems can provide a potentially lucrative diversification strategy, as seen with the Knowlton Farms example. And we also are really thinking about agrivoltaics as a way to keep the family farms viable over the next 20 plus years. It's a long-term agricultural goal that the state has to maintain a strong presence of family-owned and small business farms. The second concern we see relates to the aesthetics of these projects and, the potential degradation of natural landscapes. This is particularly a concern of local communities and neighbors that are around sites of these projects. And typically we see that the first and easiest response is just, extensive screenings, such as large fences or trees to help mitigate some of the visual impact of these projects. I'll say anecdotally, me and a few other team members got to tour an agrivoltaics facility the other month that had a really high fence surrounding the perimeter of the project because a next door neighbor was vocally against the project. But once the project was installed and operational, that same neighbor actually was inspired to go ahead and install solar on their own home. So I think this is a great example of showing that even if there is pushback before a project is built, once these systems are operational, they can potentially play a role in helping local communities adopt solar further and kind of change people's perspectives and opinions. Additionally, in terms of aesthetic concerns, these projects are being installed on private property. The farmers are in control of their private property. Us as a state agency, northern neighbors, we really can't tell the farmers what to do or not to do with their own land. So ultimately, there's not much that we can do on this front, nor should we be able to necessarily. And the final concern that we really see brought up a lot is the fact that agrivoltaics are still a relatively novel and untested technology. And, particularly here in the States, it hasn't been tried at scale. And in the mind of DOER and Massachusetts policymakers, this kind of feels like a classic chicken and egg situation where the only way that we're going to be able to learn and scale up is by actually doing these projects. And so we view the smart programs agrivoltaics component as kind of a pilot program. So only less than 1% of all smart projects are agrivoltaics projects. And these projects have significantly more oversight and, as I mentioned, this rigorous predetermination process than other project types, exactly so we can do this important data collection and research. And also, we want to be mindful of the fact that each farm is going to be different. So we have these policies in place that are across the board, but we want to be able to be nimble and responsive to the needs of each farm. So we can move to the next slide. So now I'll talk a bit more about community buy-in and some more ways in which we're, aiming to work with communities to improve the acceptance of agrivoltaics. First relates to zoning and permitting. So Massachusetts is a local control state, meaning that our municipalities are the ultimate bodies who make the final decisions for permitting of projects. So it's really important to have the buy-in of the town and their, So what we've begun to see is that towns are starting to defer to our predetermination process when permitting these agrivoltaics projects, which has really helped to legitimize our approach. And additionally, within the past year, the state has also launched a new renewable energy permitting reform that provides model bylaws and practices for that municipalities can opt in to use, as well as a new state-level disputes resolution process. And both of these factors also provide more consistency and cohesion in the creation of new renewable energy projects, including agrivoltaic systems. So next, to address the concern on the previous slide about the novelty of these systems, as I mentioned, we maintain a really strong research and annual reporting arm of the program to continue to build out our understanding of and expertise in agrivoltaics. So we maintain a really strong relationship with the UMass Clean Energy Extension which in addition to supporting the applicants on their applications, are also responsible for collecting data on operational projects and conducting further research as needed. Additionally, projects need to submit annual reports to DOER and MDAR, which highlight, agricultural yields, challenges, and successes that the project faced in that year. The submission of these reports is necessary for the farm to continue to receive the incentive, and ultimately, we want all these reports to provide invaluable data that really help us to better understand the benefits and potential costs of agrivoltaics moving forward. And additionally, all of these annual reports from every farm are publicly available on our website so other stakeholders can learn from these projects. Finally, I'll end on some challenges and lessons learned. We can go to the next slide. Thank you. So first and foremost, we find it's really crucial to find a balance between comprehensive policy that's broad enough to work for all agrivoltaic systems, while also being able to account for the unique needs of each operation. Second, we really need to define what expectations about agricultural productivity for agrivoltaics systems looks like, while avoiding value judgments about traditional farming. And kind of associated with that, we as a state energy agency need to be mindful to not overstep or overjudge decisions being made by farming experts on the ground. Third, we have a responsibility as a state agency to be more attuned with and responsive to a rapidly changing landscape as a result of shifting macroeconomic and state and federal policy changes. Finally, agrivoltaics is still new. And to make sure that we're successful in our pursuit of agrivoltaics, we need to take a learning by doing approach, but that can't be accomplished successfully without strong community education and buy-in. So thank you so much, and very happy to move into Q&A.
All right, thank you everyone for speaking and providing such wonderful information. Hello everyone, my name is Stacy Washington. I'm the Clean Energy and Equity Director with STACE, and I'll be moderating the Q&A. So thank you all for submitting some wonderful questions we have for our speakers today. I'm going to start with one for Carrington, or anyone is welcome to answer. For legislators and states, what can they do to support agrivoltaics in rural communities? What similar legislation exists in other states?
Thank you, Stacy, and thank you to the person who asked that question. At the most basic level, our state legislators can pass a definition for agrivoltaics and add that into their laws officially. More progressive policies that we've seen passed in the last couple of years. I know Colorado passed SB 2392 in 2023, which created a funding mechanism for research and demonstration projects in the state. At the same time, they also created a law that allowed for property tax exemptions for farming and solar equipment used for agrivoltaics. Those are some basic examples, but feel free to reach out to me and we can talk more about ideas.
Great. And this one, I'm thinking this is Jim, but feel free for anyone to answer. This is about funding and what type of other funding is available for these projects. What other loan programs and grants are available? Small farmers generally do not have funds available to invest. So what can they do if they don't have that money?
Yeah, it depends on where you're located, which state you're in. I mentioned in my presentation some of the different resources out there for debt funding and for some grant funding. Some states are more progressive than others. As you find out, Massachusetts is much different than South Carolina in terms of what we have to offer, to incentivize some of those projects. But, there's also, I mentioned some special revolving loan funds out there that are willing to kind of go out of the box of what lenders typically, space they lend in. So you just have to kind of do your research, contact your SBDCs. Those folks know what's on the ground in those states and kind of what's available out there.
Thank you, Jim. And have you seen any developers offer any incentives?
I haven't personally seen developers offering incentives. It might just depend on the context of the project, though. Could be a reality.
Okay, and I do want to mention too that there are green banks or clean energy funds that are popping up in states throughout the country. And North and South Carolina has Clean Energy Fund of the Carolinas. that can offer low interest loans or loans that you would not normally get at a bank for green project or clean energy projects. So feel free to check out those options. And if you're not aware, please reach out to us and we can connect you with your clean energy fund or green bank in your state. Our next question is about planning and design. So maybe Carrington can help with this. In states without policy drivers or incentives, what can landowners, producers, local communities do to ensure agriculture production is intentionally incorporated into solar project planning and design for the outset rather than treated as an afterthought?
Great question. Landowners, community members, local government officials can come together to pass a county ordinance or a local ordinance to ensure that agrivoltaic projects are prioritized or supported in their county.
Thank you, Carrington. Turner, turning to you. During your presentation, you mentioned 33 cents per kilowatt. That's wonderful. 13 megawatts developed. Wow, keep at it. How many megawatts are in the pipeline by the next few years?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know if I can provide specifics. And I would say apologies, also my cat just jumped up on my desk. It, I think we're seeing a slight downtick, obviously due to broader factors, primarily the loss of the ITC. But I would say probably in the hundreds of megawatts over the next 2 to 3 years.
Wonderful. Thank you, Turner. And then I think Jim or Turner can answer this question. There is a question about the best types of farming for agrivoltaics. Are there specific types of farming that are more suitable than others? For instance, it seems like cattle and sheep grazing would benefit from the shading, but does it negatively impact grass growth? Are there electrocution risk for livestock? Does the shading aspect presence of equipment impact crop farming? What impact does it have on water availability, if any, e.g., does it interfere with rainfall harvesting? Does it require water to main panels, etc.?
I guess I can take that one. Yeah, I mean, like with every type of farming, it's all different. So you have to kind of look at your land, look at the operation you plan to implement, or if you already have those operations. There's definitely gonna be some impact. It's just like, what is that impact? And how do you mediate that? And, a lot of positive and negative with anything, right? It's just you got to figure out how that works in your land. So building a team, right? Building a team of advisors and folks that you can put around you from extension to business development to some of the energy folks, just to come in, help do those assessments, help, do the feasibility and make sure that it makes sense.
Great. And I think, Jim, you might have covered most of this in your speaking, but someone asked about USDA REAP. They saw that part is open and then transition to deploy. Where are we with this?
Yeah, the REAP guarantee is open, which is a loan, essentially a guaranteed loan product. The REAP grant is not open. They're not taking applications. Yeah, the policy is being reviewed and for changes and not really sure. They've not given us an indication when it might open up. I don't want to say any dates because the minute I do that, I'll be wrong. But we're just standing by and just if you're interested in it, keep calling to your USD office and getting updates and just checking online and stuff like that. I think it will continue to be around. I've seen it benefit so many people. And if the legislators know about that, and some of them do, you can really see the impact that it creates on the rural communities.
Great. Our next question is about the size of a farm that would be good for these funding opportunities. For Jim or Turner, I know the REAP grant, what size farms are you seeing in this 15 acres eligible for these types of programs?
I don't think it's specific for a size farm. I've seen very small farms to super big farms. You just have to be an agricultural producer, which means that you produce at least 50% or more from agricultural production. to be eligible. So you can be like, I've seen a, you know, $40 million farm get it because they're agricultural producers, so you don't necessarily, if rural small businesses are eligible too, but you have to make under a certain amount to be considered small business based on SBA size standards. But if we're just talking about farms, there's no real, any farm can apply and get the incentive.
And Turner, what about the Massachusetts program? Is there a size?
There isn't an acreage size, but any solar project that's above 25 kilowatts would be and is an agricultural operation would be eligible to receive the grant. So, a very small solar facility would be able to receive it if it is an agricultural one as well.
Thank you. Our next question is for Turner about your program. Has Massachusetts seen any example of bifacial PV mounted vertically on north-south fence line to take advantage of morning and afternoon output and need and pricing to reduce required utility ramp rate?
That's a great question. Off the top of my head, I think we have seen examples of bifacial panels, but I need to confirm that. I will say it is pretty common for us to see solar tracking systems where the panels will follow the sun throughout the day. But I can dig more into specifically on bifacial panels.
Great. Thank you, Turner. The next question is more about financing and how to get capital. How do we get capital providers for clean energy to extend that financial support out to farmers who are essentially farming as operating support services for their sites? So they're not the owner of the land, but they're the ones that are operating the land. How do they get into this type of program?
So they're leasing the land and then they want to employ agrivoltaics.
Yes, they said they're third party.
Okay. Okay. In terms of financing, I might have mentioned this before, but basically all lenders are cash flow lenders, which they just want to see that there's the money to cover debt service, through the business operations and through other sources, if you have those. So that would be kind of like their main driving factor. There's other elements of underwriting to determine whether they're willing to invest in that particular project. And they take into consideration the lease of the land, those type things. If it all makes sense, I'm sure they would be willing to entertain it. And there are lenders out there for just about everything. It just matter of how expensive it is. So your rates may be higher for more risky ventures. Some might not have the appetite for it at all. Just depends on what their portfolio is like. But yeah, it's definitely lenders out there. And when you get into grants and incentives, then it might be a little trickier on the lease side, because they want to determine control of the land and the period of control of the land. So there's those type things to consider as well.
Thank you, Jim. The next question is about stacking or sharing information across states. Are states working together on agrivoltaics programs? For example, Massachusetts. Are you working with others on data and research? How are states working together? Or are
Yeah,
they working together?
yes, I can say on our end, there aren't any formal working relationships with other state agencies, like other state energy agencies, but there have been many events not dissimilar to this, where there's been a lot of info sharing, and there are numerous working groups that sometimes bring this up as a topic. But yeah, we haven't directly collaborated with another state specifically, but do want to reiterate that all of our information is publicly available and are more than happy and willing to always share with other states as needed.
Great, thank you, Turner. And then I have a question about ROA. What is the ROA on a small agrivoltaics installation? Does anybody have that information?
I think, in terms of ROI or ROA, it's going to depend on each project. It's going to be different because agriculture, I mean, like the farming operations are going to have different returns versus, what you get from the the solar system. And like in South Carolina, I was just looking up Dominion, like pays back if you're net metering, it could be 3 to 5 cent, is what they pay per kilowatt hour. That's going to be different in Massachusetts, if you're thinking about, looking at returns and things like that. And then also there's energy offsetting energy usage, what you realize in gains from that. It's going to be different anywhere you go and kind of so you have to assess each project individually. And I love to say that it's kind of like, yeah, you can't it's hard to give a general blanket statement to a lot of things. It's like you got to look at it individually.
Great, thank you, Jim. And we're hitting the top of the hour. We do have a few more questions, so if you're able to stay, please do. We'll try to get a couple more questions in before we close out. If you have to leave, I want to thank you for attending, and we'll send out a recording of this and more information in an email. But we'll try to get a couple more questions in here before we end to make sure everybody gets their questions answered. Let's see, I'm trying to remember where I left off. What about data for legislature? What are you all putting together for the legislative process to help with policy? Is anybody doing that in the states? Jim, do you have anything that you could put together for the legislature to help provide data?
No, well, I serve on some nonprofits that would do some more policy driven. I work for the state, so I'm limited as to what I do around policy, but I serve on nonprofits that do more policy work. And that has not been at the top of the priority list, but generally in South Carolina, our politics are a little. We're in a commissioner race, so it's been a little, they they're not the political climate is they don't want big like solar projects in South Carolina because of the perception, that it's taking up good agricultural land, things like that, right? So we're dealing with that, and then it's like, how do you introduce the concept of agrivoltaics to legislators? I think once they're educated, they could actually see the benefit of it. And so there's that, and then we also need the leaders to come forth and do that stuff. So we're real interested in it. I think there's a lot of people that are interested, and hopefully we can learn from others and do that here in South Carolina.
Great. And then my last question will just be about examples. And we had someone ask about examples in Florida and Texas for agrivoltaics. I do know in Florida, I believe Florida Power and Light does some agrivoltaics projects on their solar farms. And then Texas is not one of our states, but we can look up and see if there's anything in Texas for you. And that will end our Q&A. I would like to thank everyone for attending today. Thank you to Jim, Carrington, and Turner for speaking at our webinar. And thank you all for attending, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you.